Hi everyone, and welcome to today's MediaWorks masterclass. We're going to be focusing on all things creative edge in AI-driven performance. So, what high-performing campaigns do differently. My name's David Norris. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at MediaWorks, and I'll be hosting the MediaWorks masterclass today. And I've got two guests with me on the sofa. So, Paul and Max. So, Paul, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Paul, Managing Partner of MediaWorks, and I lead on our strategy and creative teams and projects. Easy for me to say.
Thanks, Paul.
And I'm Max Milburn. I'm the paid social lead here at MediaWorks, so I handle everything paid social.
Fantastic. So we've been messing around, really, being a bit creative, dare I say. And what we've tried to do is try to incorporate an interactive element into today's MediaWorks masterclass. So without further ado, what we'd like you to do is, if you've got an opportunity, we'd like you to either go on to menti.com and add that code, or the easier way to do it is literally hold your phone up to the screen, scan that QR code, and what we'd like to do is we've just got a question we'd like to ask everybody and get your input on how you're currently engaging with AI across your creative activity. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that, and as I say, there's two ways to do it. And yeah, we just want to know from the audience of marketing professionals and business leaders, sort of how you're currently utilizing that in today's in today's business environment. So what we'd like you to do is, I say, if you've had a chance to scan that, we'll also drop it into the chat so you can engage with that. We'd like to ask you that question. So, you know, I or you use AI too, and then select all that apply. And we're able to see that dynamically changing on the screen. Wow. So you can see some big shifts. So writing copies in there, creative stills, analyze ad performance, creative ad variance. Ooh, I was going to say nobody was picking creating video, but then we got a surge of people using creative video.
That's the most fun bit.
Yeah, that's most of the exciting stuff happens there. But yeah, so that's really interesting, isn't it? To look at that and see that people are using it heavily to write copy. Second on that list as it stands right now is create stills. So static ads, I think's really interesting, or static activity. And then obviously driving campaign performance. Again, something we'd like to explore as we go through today. More create videos come in. I think that's is good to see. And then creating ad variants. It's interesting as the create ad variants piece is something we're going to be talking about heavily as we go through today, and how we actually do that at scale, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah. Hopefully after this, we'll see this change a lot.
Yeah.
You know, which bots we kind of think you should be using AI more, and which bots you think you might want to stay away from in some areas. Definitely.
So thank you very much for your input on that. I think it's a nice little way to understand and frame the session as we go through. Really, we're going to cut this session almost into two halves. I think it's more about first half being on creative foundations and how do we align that with all of the AI shifts that are taking place. And then the second half, much more sort of future gazing around what is sort of the current state of play, but where is sort of AI and creative performance actually heading. So the power of creative. So Paul, to come to you.
Right, okay, so I mean, any of you who've been to a masterclass where we've been talking about creative and performance marketing, you've probably seen this slide. It's a really important piece of data that shows that creative is the biggest contributor to sales in an ad campaign, and it's more impactful than targeting. Now, I've got to be careful with the guys in the paid team that they don't, get a bit jumpy at this point. But you know, if you think about it, you know the impact of creative in terms of driving impact, memorability, thumb stopping, all of those things, and the data is out there to say that creative is very, very important.
And I think for me, it all links in with that attention piece, doesn't it? Like, how do you grab attention in today's sort of advertising space?
Yeah, and I think when we think about creative, I think, you know, normally when we talk about performance marketing, we talk about click-through rates, conversion rates, cost per acquisition, things like that, which are really, really important metrics. But this metric of attention is the new one that we all need to focus on. You know, we know that 3.7 seconds is the amount of time that we've got to grab someone's attention. We know that 80% of ads fail to grab attention. So, you know, the thumb stopping, eye catching nature of our creative is really important to drive performance.
And I think this slide for me really highlights some of the challenges around the sea of sameness. I think it's a really good thing. I know we've talked about this a lot, Paul and Max, is one of the challenges is there's so much generic advertising that takes place.
and it tends to be that when you're in a given category, there tends to be category norms. So if you think about car advertising or property advertising, even fashion, you get category norms emerging. And again, the evidence says you interview people, you research it, and people misattribute adverts all the time. Now, that is probably the number one thing that you do not want to happen as a result of someone seeing your ad, is to think it's for someone else. So it's very important to be distinctive. You might not necessarily be able to be unique, but be distinctive, be different, and make sure that even if you feel a bit twinny with someone, that you can learn from the that our willing models on the screen there. That you can still be an identical twin, but be different.
It's a good point. And I think, interestingly, we've sort of developed a bit of a process, haven't we? Because obviously we work with a range of clients across a range of sectors. For me, I think sort of our process for creating campaigns with Cut Through really focuses on these 6 cyclical sort of areas.
Yeah, and any of you who work in marketing, none of this is a surprise, but I think it's just important to remember targeting and insights. Always understand your audience first. Then we always look at messaging. So your messaging should kind of pivot off a proposition, should be designed to appeal to your audience and designed to achieve the goals of the campaign. Then you get into asset development, thinking about the different formats you could be using, then thinking about how you're going to test that. Talk to the media team might sit on the other side of the room to you, but make sure you talk to them. Having a good approach to A/B testing and thinking about how you use different variants is critical.
I think that's massive, because I think that's one of the things that I think when we audit accounts, a lot of the time, which is one of the things that we don't see, like a real structured testing approach and testing built in.
Yeah, so important. And all those insights from all the money that you've been spending, all the impressions, all the engagements, it all could be fed back into the next round of creative development.
Yeah, and I think this is why, for me, it's always a cycle.
Yeah.
It's cyclical. This isn't a one and done. It's always about that refinement over a period of time.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to go on to more of that as we go through. So yeah, and then the end of it is kind of make it live and then optimize as well. But yeah, it should always be a cycle. You should never stop, and you should really embrace this idea of testing variants.
So in the next sort of section of this, I think we've given people a good overview of our process and some real examples and some real impactful data points around why we need to create high performing creative. But I think we've broken it down, haven't we, into a number of really key areas that we do want to dig a little deeper into, in terms of when we say high performing creative, what do we actually mean and what's really driving that? So I think for us, when we talk about this, it often starts with a messaging matrix. And when we talk about the messaging matrix, really what we're talking about is how do we have messaging that works across the funnel?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be no surprise to everyone here how important messaging is when trying to speak to your audience. But it's always important to keep in mind was where in their journey are they and what kind of tone do they need to have depending on where they are in their own unique journey. So at a Reach campaign, if you're trying to introduce people to a brand, you want to make sure that you can both engage and educate that audience, build trust, and really position yourself as someone who, or as a brand who they want to engage with more, where you can kind of filter them through into a nurturing stage. This is where you can be a little bit more forward with what you want from them, try and get that first click through to a website or full video view, a bit more like collectible data to kind of leverage into the acquisition stage, where you can remarket and be a little bit more action focused with your messaging, stronger and harder call to actions. You can be a bit more product and service led with kind of messaging that you want to do at that stage.
And I think a really good test, I think often when we're thinking about creative for performance, is actually like map out the asset and map out sort of the ads that you're actually running and go, where do they actually sit in the funnel? Where would you put them when you've actually mapped them all out? Say, right, where are they actually sitting within the funnel? Because I think that's often a bit of a nice way to do a bit of a gap analysis around, does it actually align with sort of awareness? Is it an awareness-based message? Is there an awareness-based creative? Does it all align?
And whatever you do, don't end up with an ad that tries to do all three.
Yeah.
Where are you going to target? What's the call to action going to be? And the logic breaks down very quickly.
Yeah.
So it's always good to segment.
So I guess then, Max, into how do we go about designing the right messaging? Sort of some of the key principles that we've got here.
I was going to take this one rather
Okay,
than Max, but
fine.
I think it's kind of some of what we said before. So think about your audience, think about what they want, think about what they need, Think about how you're going to be able to target them as well. Can you get a behavioural signal that you can target, or something attitudinal? Think about the kind of offering that you're saying, so that you're selling. So is it a service? Is it a product? Think about the strengths. Think about the claims you can make. What's different about it than the competing products or services? And then I think for me, this is a really important bit, is, and almost these 3 and 4 kind of sit in parallel, really. But think about the functional benefits. And if you ever want to get your head around a functional benefit, just look at any advertising from Procter and Gamble over the last God knows how many years, where, you know, to demonstrate that the paper towel being strong when it's wet, you make a wet paper towel and you lift something heavy up with it.
Yeah.
You know, you spell out the functional benefits, but then you should always have the emotional benefit. People respond very well to an emotional benefit. So how's it going to make you feel? Is it going to improve the quality of your life? Is it going to improve the relationships that you have, or, you know, how you feel about yourself and how you feel about the world, are all the emotional things that you should be looking at as well.
So as part of designing the right messaging, then what we then sort of throw it into is really that whole point around the messaging matrix, and we produce these, don't we, quite a lot for our clients.
Yeah, and for me, but a couple of important things about a messaging matrix. For me, they shouldn't be final copy, because you can always go and play with the copy later and come up with a really snappy line for something. But your messaging matrix should be structured around the customer journey. So down the left-hand side, we should have, you know, it's awareness, it's consideration, it's retargeting, it's conversion. Then look at, you know, what headline could be for each of those sections. Then think about a longer version of the copy. We often do a kind of a short, long version for statics, and we do a longer, long version for carousels. And we might even get into an outline of a video script in this section as well. Then be really clear about your call to action. I'd also at this stage include your target URLs, where because again, it all focuses the mind, and it helps you working with your client, or, you know, working with your colleagues to go, okay, this is the purpose of this bit, and you can, and it should be different at each stage. And by laying it out like that, it kind of forces you to design copy and creative that is going to do the right job.
Yeah, and I think going back to that initial survey that people filled out, I think what we saw was like, it was creative writing, it was creative it was around sort of that ad copy, if you like, seemed to be a real focus. And I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it, in a world where you can use a lot of machine learning and AI to produce massive volumes. It's actually about, how do you structure some of those conversations? How do you structure your thoughts in this space?
You know, I'm sure, you know, I'm not going to give any trade secrets away, but using AI to help generate messaging matrices is a very good use of AI.
Yeah.
Because AI, you give it the structure, you give it, you know, you tell it the rules, and it's going to have a very good first go at things. Like all AI, you then need to go and check it, you need to check the language, you need to check the claims. It's always going to give itself a pat on the back and say it's done a great job for you.
Yeah.
So, you know, you need to go through it with, you know, in detail. But the point here is structure and the philosophy and the principles that you're following. Whether you can use AI, whether you're going to do it by hand, it's a really critical part.
Yeah. So when it comes to then the next stage around sort of creating high performing sort of assets and high performing creative, is really around that ad creation approach, isn't it? And I think what we've seen is there's so many options that exist right now. You know, there's so many variants in terms of asset types, formats, etc., more than there's ever been.
It can be really intimidating to figure out where do you start, which is why, like, having a really good foundation of what your audience looks like and where do they engage with this content is really important. But it's also just really important to understand that high performing campaigns often require multiple channels, placements, multiple ad formats, and that also requires a big pipeline of content to support a good testing period. And also a good thing to know that different ad formats, videos, carousels, display, they all have different objectives, they serve different purposes in delivering message and communicating value to your audience.
Yeah, I think for me, that's a massive element, isn't it? And it's about then, you know, we've just talked about it's easier in lots of ways to create lots of content than it has been before. There's so many variants out there. It's about having that really structured approach. And I think one way that we can structure that is definitely around sort of Google's ABCD model, which I know we've talked about previously, but I think it's always a really good one to come back to, Paul.
Yeah, no, it's a good model, and, you know, there's many out there, but you know, pick one, try it. If it works, you enjoy using it. If it helps you process, then great. It's very simple. Grab attention, brand early and often, create a connection, you know, create that emotional connection I've said about emotional benefits before, and then have a clear call to action, have clear direction. Now, if you're following all of this, you end up with a really, really well-focused campaign. But I think this gets into not just the words, but the visuals as well. So that's why, you know, we quite like this model.
And I love the next slide in the sense that I love the way sort of psychology plays into actually what you see versus where people spend a lot of their time. I think it's really interesting because there's certain elements to this that are often really overlooked. But actually, if you use this model when it comes to, for example, statics, it's a really, really good way to consider sort of where you should put your focus and how people's eyes are going to be drawn to content and in which order.
Yeah, and I think the critical thing here is the bit of copy you might spend the most time on, which is the post copy, is the thing that people will read last, and you've done 90% of the work before you even get that.
Definitely. And I guess, look, 63% of buyers say that video content helps inform their buying decisions. I think we saw that. We were surprised, I guess, at the beginning when the survey was taking place, how many people said they were using AI for video. But I think for me, we saw that obviously start to shoot up towards the end. And it definitely, we know that the platforms have been really pushing heavily on the use of video and the impact of video. I think any of the platforms that we have a conversation with, whether it be Google or YouTube, if you like, or whether it be Meta, Instagram, Facebook, etc., is they're all talking about the power of video.
Yeah, that's the way the industry's going at the moment. Video's becoming more and more important than ever. And on the next slide, we actually have a few tips and tricks to kind of beat the feed in that process. So a lot of time, or traditionally, when you want a quick campaign out, still images are really easy to produce, but they often lack that kind of cut through, especially on a busy placement like a feed, for example. And you know, we highlight here the human brain is hardwired for motion. So if it moves, we notice it. And it's really important to try and enter that game as much as possible when creating content. One of the quick ways that we do it is just try to include motion where possible. So what traditionally might have been a single image ad, we add a little bit of animated text, infographic that moves, just something, a 5-15 second video loop. And, you know, we've highlighted a key metric on there that we often see a 10 to 15% increase in conversion rate just by adding that extra layer of attention to the creative.
And I think one of the challenges that we see then is like it can be quite overwhelming. I think for me is the first place to start. So I think sort of what we've put on the screen is really a little prompt or one page around sort of how you can go about designing that short form video content.
Yeah. Especially when you want to try and have a narrative structure, or you know, you kind of reach that longer end of the short form video content, it can be really intimidating on how to approach that. There's so many different opportunities. So it's really important to kind of have a basic framework to kind of work from to kind of help that process. So at the very start, the way that I'll quickly run through this now, but it's something that people can take away and look into. But it's really important to know the hook. We had at the beginning 3.7 seconds at the beginning of a video to grab someone's attention. And then, you know, we've highlighted on the side 5 different ways that you kind of approach that. Often asking a question is really good, or trying to use some kind of audio clip to kind of initially make quite a punchy impact. Then we go into the main bodies, as we get into the meat and potatoes, your core message, where you get across different ways to kind of communicate this. Product demonstrations are a great way to kind of relate to your audiences. If you can use humor, you've got to make something really memorable. And at the end, it's really important to kind of to end that with a strong drive call to action. So, you know, this can be as simple as encouraging someone to learn more from another page. It can be posing a question. It needs to align as well with the messaging matrix we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
Just make sure that kind of that action kind of really gets the result that you want from your ad.
It totally throws me when there's no call to action, by the way. And I see that quite often, where it'll just be like, you'll get through those capture attention. So I'm interested. They've maintained my attention, and I'm sat there going, right, what's next?
Well, it makes no sense in a digital world.
Nah.
You sat there with your mouse going, come on, man.
Yeah.
Where do I click?
Yeah, your finger on a screen and you're ready to enact. And I think, look, one of the things that we did want to talk about was creators and influencers and how they are used and how we can utilize sort of creators and influencers to really build that trust and boost performance.
Yeah, the world of like content creators changes like so much. Now with these platforms like TikTok One or influencer marketplaces, where you can very easily access a pool of content creators and have that kind of discourse and communication with them to kind of, you know, help them promote your product or service. And the 3 main points on here that I've broken down is that creator-led content captures attention. So what that kind of means is that to access a creator, you then are able to access their wealth of knowledge, their experience on a platform. We talked about frameworks before. They're probably very used to kind of engaging with those frameworks and producing that content. And it really helps with that initial testing phase to cut down all the different variations and testing you'll have to do. The second point I make is that platform native creators are key. So the way that TikTok works is very different to the way that YouTube works.
Yeah.
And be able to speak to the right creators and the right platform can really help you, get the most out of those specific placements. And then finally, authenticity and credibility by using real people. We'll talk about it later on with the word AI slot gets moved a lot. And I think in a world where AI is everywhere, it becomes even more important to try and get real people doing real things in your videos.
Thanks, Max. So I think that one of the things that, anybody who's joined MediaWorks masterclasses before will know is we do like to offer, a free giveaway or an exclusive offer. And I think for us, what we'd like to do out of today's session is if anybody wants to register their interest to receive a free paid media creative audit, where we'll basically run your creative activity through all of the frameworks that we've got and offer advice, guidance, tips, tricks as we go through, then please do register using the link that's just been shared in the chat right now. I say this is pure, no obligation. It's just something we like to do as a bit of a understanding what is going on with you and in terms of the assets that you're producing, the creative activities that you're doing, and the ways that we can support you with that. So as I say, anybody who's interested in that, the link's now in the chat, so please do sign up for that. So I guess in the last sort of 10 minutes, what I want us to talk about is how do you stay ahead in the age of AI? So we all talk about AI. It's come up on every single masterclass we've done for the last 18 months. But I think for me, there's so much going on in this space. So I think in the last few slides, what we really want to do was sort of cipher that down and really hone in on a real couple of points that we wanted to go through. So Meta's Andromeda, tell me all about it.
So when we talked before about testing frameworks and having massive creative variance, that's not just our opinion on the matter. This has been a recent update by Meta. The Meta Andromeda update has been kind of like quite industry disrupting. It really has kind of changed the way that we're meant to think about our campaign structure and our creative in particular. So what used to be quite an audience-led or an audience-first way of targeting, you really define your audience and then you try and target them with assets. Instead, the creative is going to be way more important in informing how that targeting works. So having a mass amount of variations of creative helps with algorithm learning, making sure you're using the right copy, bringing in some like SEO and PPC keyword research into what your ad copy is. It's going to matter a lot more on what that content is and how much content you have if you really do want that good performance on these platforms.
So the key takeaway there is sort of performance optimization now is less reliant on audience precision and benefits more from creative strength, diversity, and signal quality. So I guess this for us is feeding the algorithm better information, better data that it can then learn from.
Yeah, it's a lot more hands-off than it used to be.
Right.
So a lot of time, instead of, we're looking for those interest signals, it's now what data do you have? What first-party data do you have? How can you leverage that to get the most out of your platform?
Wow, so that's quite a big shift. It's really interesting, really interesting. So I guess beyond Andromeda then, so one particular example, there's been a number of industry-wide algorithm shifts, hasn't there, that have taken place?
Yeah, well, Meta is an industry leader, and when they change, a lot of people fall suit. So looking at a bunch of other different changes that have happened in the wake of Andromeda, these are the three ones that I've kind of seen across multiple platforms. So one of them being creative drives targeting. We touched upon that in the Andromeda one, but just making sure that that your creative is at front of mind when producing any type of campaign. The human premium, so platforms like YouTube, for example, have sort of put in algorithms and leaned away from the use of AI in image creation. At the start, when we saw the poll, we saw a lot of people creating images from scratch using AI.
Yeah.
The algorithm is telling us not to do that as much.
Right.
Creating variations is really important.
Yeah.
But from scratch, that can kind of harm your performance. So making sure you try to introduce people as much as possible, a real human element, and as well as the state and app economy. In platform lead generation has been around for a while, but like TikTok is taking that to the next level by trying to have as much conversion on site as possible.
Yeah.
Just making sure we're aware of that and we're always kind of tailoring our campaigns to leverage to what is what.
Yeah, I've often seen as well, sometimes we're penalised for sending traffic outside of the site, because I think for me, it's one of the things that like all the platforms are screaming for people's attention and engagement time, etc. So anything that they can do to get you to stay in the platform is so important.
When you think about it, if you're sending someone off platform, they then lose the chance to re-advertise to that person. So
Yeah.
you're a lot more valuable to them if you keep them on platform so they can re-engage and continue to grab that attention.
Okay, so I guess more broadly then, and I know we're not going to go into this in loads of depth, but I guess sort of where platform AI is at, what we've done is we've listed a number of the main sort of social channels that exist. We've talked about sort of what their update name is. They've all got weird and wonderful names, by the way. It's a really interesting lesson in branding that we could really probably actually have its own masterclass on. But I think sort of what we would say is sort of 2 or 3 key big shifts coming out of that are really sort of feature changes, Max.
Yeah, I mean, both YouTube and TikTok have activated stuff that are going to really like improve like the human element. We talked before about the AI, like the human premium, but also TikTok is trying to include more hyper local content. So if you are a local content creator, you're way more likely to be shown to your local audience. That was never a thing in the past.
Yeah. It was actually a real problem with TikTok, wasn't it? The targeting capabilities on TikTok were really poor when it first, you know, even going back 18 months, 2 years, it was really poor, but that's obviously got much stronger.
Yeah, and it just leverages a whole new world of content creators in there as well that we can try and leverage, as well as like all the different optimizations with your campaign delivery stuff. So Performance Plus, Advantage Plus has been on Meta for a while, smart campaigns on Snapchat, all these different ways where it's a lot more reliant on feeding first-party signals into the platforms rather than relying on defining a user based on interests.
So this is one of the areas I want to just focus on a little more, generating creative variance at scale, because I know I've had so many conversations about this, and I've also seen, to be fair, Paul, you've came up with loads of different examples of where we've actually done this for clients. So do you want to talk us through sort of different approaches to this?
Yeah, and I think that you can hear that stuff about Andromeda and go, you go like, well, the creator's going to lead it. Well, I'm going to try and sell a car by showing someone a picture of a burrito. No, that isn't what this is about.
Yeah.
It's about still coming up with a strong creative idea and knowing why you're doing it, knowing why it's right for your brand, knowing why it's right for your audience. But then it's then getting into a world of how do you create variants that are meaningful, that the algorithm is going to be able to use. And I think from a creative point of view, you might look at a photo and go, yeah, it's okay, we've nailed it. And then you kind of start going, well, what if it was 2 people? What if in this instance there's a woman and a kid walking on the beach? What if the woman had a bucket as well? Does that say something different? So the tools are now there to start doing this and to start doing it at scale. And we're very much in this world now and starting to see the results coming back through. And you can't necessarily predict exactly which one is going to be the highest performer, but for me this isn't a kind of taking away creative freedom or the skill or of being a creative mind. It's allowing you to do things at a scale that you could never have comprehended before, and probably would have been out of the reach of most of your clients' budgets. So this testing at scale now is a reality, and we should all be getting into it.
And to Max's point earlier, sort of, it's also what the platforms are really hungry for, is all of these variants to test from. And I guess sort of on this then, we talk about sort of why.
Yeah, and I mean, this is Adobe's done quite a lot of research into this, and there's a little example on the right there about it's a guy who's wearing a different coloured jumper. The jumper's got a different logo on it, different background colour, that kind of thing. And that to me is a good example of testing variants. But then if you look at the image underneath on the bottom right, it gets into, well, why did that image perform well? Why did that ad perform well? Was it the lighting? Was it the colour of the woman's hair? Is it the fact that she's got a cat, not a dog, not a budgie? Is it that the background's blurred? Is it that it feels like it's the morning or the evening? And there are all these different things that now become a reality that you can test against. So I think this is really exciting, and the data is coming through saying this will make your campaign perform better because you will be tailoring ads to your audience, or the platform will be doing that for you.
But I guess the caveat to that
Yeah.
is AI slop.
Yeah, well, and there's some great stuff the other week from Ogilvy. In fact, there was a really, really good chat yesterday on the Claude subreddit about somebody who'd started an AI YouTube channel, and like basically the whole internet just went, no, you shouldn't do that. It's bad for the algorithm, but it's kind of bad for everything. So we're all familiar with the word AI slop. There's a new theory going around about internet death is going to happen as a result of AI, because everything will be garbage and
Right.
all the copy will be written by AIs, and so there's some interesting stuff going on at the moment. But I think for me, AI is about a tool. So deploy it in the right point in your process. Don't use it for everything, because you'll lose your point of difference. But do use it to kind of imagine and explore ideas. It's a tool.
And I guess then sort of key takeaways from today's session at the end would be understand your creative basics. I think these never change. We've talked about those right at the beginning. So we talked about a number of areas with lots of tips, tricks, hints as we went through the process. I think 2 would be use AI wisely. It's a great productivity tool, but don't make slop. I think, like for us, just because it's easier to do, it still requires a lot of thought process. It requires structure. It requires frameworks to get the most out of this. Because just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. And I think it's always about that quality versus quantity debate.
Yeah. And this last one here, in a world where everything can be perfect, it's going to be the imperfect that stands out. So, as with all trends, there's people getting into doing AI, but, visuals that are absolutely insanely, crazily, amazing and perfect. But when everyone does that, it's going to be the ad that doesn't do that stands out. So, I think keep your eye on imperfection, keep your eye on glitches, keep your eye on human authenticity. YouTube's looking for it, but so will your audience.
Yeah, and we've had this before in the past. We usually see kind of cutting through that feed. It doesn't come across like an ad. It kind of comes across like a bit of content people actually want to engage with. That just gives it a lot more value to them.
Yeah.
And then I guess penultimate point would be, again, hit the link if you're interested in us actually reviewing your content and putting it through our various frameworks and giving advice and guidance as we go. And then finally, really, it's next masterclass is Wednesday, the 25th of March, with myself, Jack, and Amy from my SEO team, who we're all going to talk about SEO without clicks. So an area that is a very hot topic at the moment, in the same way that AI in creative is a hot topic. So we'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time to cover all things SEO in a world of 0-click searches, and we hope you join us for that. Thank you very much for your involvement today. Thanks for completing the survey at the start. That was a bit of a new one for us, so really exciting. It was good to see how that played out. Thanks, Max. Thanks, Paul, and enjoy the rest of your week. Hope you enjoyed today's MediaWorks Masterclass. Thank you.